Animation can become your life. It's such a time-consuming process, and it's such a competitive industry. And yeah, absolutely enjoy it and have a great time doing it, but do not, most definitely don't kill yourself over animation. Hello, my name is Guillermo Careaga. I'm an animator here at DreamWorks. I am from Paraguay in South America, and I'm happy to be talking in this show.
So, you want to talk about time management?
Yes, let's talk about time management. And I think what I'm going to say might apply both to people working on studios or freelance animators or students working on their homework, because I think the skills, time management is more of a life skill than anything else, right? So it definitely overlaps with many life activities. But the first thing that I learned, and this was working on Madagascar 2, my supervisor at the time, Sean Mahoney, taught me this. And it sounds very simple and it's very obvious, but actually get a calendar. Get a physical calendar that you can use. And the reason for this was because we were given a bunch of shots, all of which have their own due date. And it was getting a little bit overwhelming just trying to manage all those shots and all the notes that I had for those shots and the next sequence that was coming up. So it was just a lot of information, and I had no idea if I was going to get things done on time or not. And so he said, literally, Sean Mahoney, he sat me down and he said, look, this is what I do. I grab a calendar and then I use Post-it notes. And on every single due date, I just put the Post-it right here and write, blocking for shot such and such, final polishing pass for such and such. And I would fill my calendar with these little Post-its, right? And every time that I miss a deadline or I miss my blocking, I would just easily just go like this. Okay, that's one extra day that I'm taking, right? Or, the very few cases where this happened, I did something earlier. I did something faster than I was anticipating. So I would move this Post-it a little earlier, right? So this gives me, and I understand there's Google Calendar and a bunch of digital alternatives to this, but I like the physical calendar because at a glance you get a visual of your entire schedule, the amount of work that you have, and how you can move those things around easily, right? So that's number one, right? And just being able to gauge the amount of work that you have for any given time and immediately be able to say, hey, I am able to do this, or no way, if I spread all this stuff out, you're asking me to deliver this by this date, but actually my Post-it notes go way beyond that, So not only, it's also a planning strategy, right? Because it allows you to, sort of spread out all your work and see it all in one go. So that's super useful, and several years later, I'm still using that, even though we have so many other digital alternatives, like I said. So not only does it allow you to set a date on particular tasks, but also if you want to get really granular in your planning, you can actually break up your day into several hour chunks. If you're, say for example, you're in crunch and you're doing overtime and really every minute is precious, every second is precious. If you're a freelance animator and you have this deadline coming up and there's no way you can tell the clients that, oh, just give me one more day or one more week. So you start dividing up your day into chunks where you literally write down, okay, by 10 a.m., I need to have blocking on all these shots. By 3 p.m., a next pass, and by 6 p.m. this needs to be done, for example, right? If it gets down to that. And then this all comes from Sean Mahoney. You can even go even more detailed than that and say, okay, I have 1 hour to polish the tail of this character. I have 45 minutes to do a polishing pass on the legs, for example. So you can get really detailed and really, just sort of granular in your planning, but all that, the principle behind it is you just want to make sure that you write it down, the amount of work, compare it to the amount of time that you have, and just see that, and just kind of gauge whether or not it's doable or not, or whether or not you need to hurry up and stop taking that many breaks, right? So that's super helpful, and that to me has been like my number one sort of tool, strategy, if you will, for time management. The other tip, if you will, and this is again kind of obvious, but I think it is good to repeat it, and that's typically these beginning animators that are just starting out in their career, they would allocate equal amounts of time to all stages of animation, which is not always the most efficient way of working. You want to definitely spend probably the bulk of your time on the planning stage and on the blocking stage. And the obvious thing to say is that the better an idea you have of your animation, the less you're improvising, the more planned out every single action, every single gesture is, and that goes along with video referencing and thumbnail and all these things. The more prepared you are, then of course the easier it'll be to just execute that idea, as opposed to opening Maya or whatever software you're using and start to figure things out. Because that's where, I mean, that is the single most, how do I say this? That is the part where you waste the most amount of time. Opening a scene and you have no idea what to do, right? And you start experimenting, right? Which can be fun and sometimes can be actually fantastic because you can find happy accidents, but it is a huge waste of time. It's the longest way to animate, basically. So if you plan ahead, you skip that, and you open up Maya or open up your scene with a plan and you just kind of start going. And I also mentioned this about blocking because a lot of times we want to rush blocking, and I see this a lot in student work where that initial excitement of putting in 3-4 poses and like, oh my gosh, I want to see this move, right? You start splining away, but you don't have enough information there. You don't have enough held poses or enough detail to actually make the animation meaningful and good. And so everything, you have the swimming effect where everything just starts swimming between one pose or another. And so it takes quite a bit of discipline to actually hold on, like not go on to the next step, don't spline just yet, and spend quite a bit of time in your blocking and achieve that sort of blocking plus, as they say, where the blocking is a lot more detailed than you would expect. But then, of course, when you switch to spline, all the information's there, all the keys are there, and it's just a matter of like just cleaning up what you have, right? Which takes a lot less time than if you were to start creating poses at that stage. So this is the second tip, right? Plan ahead, spend most of your time in the planning stage, in the blocking stage, and ideally you want like the remaining 30% or 20% doing the spline pass / polishing pass. If things go right? Of course, there's client notes, there's director notes, and that can throw your planning off completely. But in an ideal world, you want to just plan everything and then just execute it, be done, move on to the next thing. The other thing is also just getting knowledgeable with the software. Obviously at DreamWorks we use proprietary software, but for Maya there's countless plugins that make the process so much faster. I know A-Tools, for example, is a popular one where it's so many shortcuts and so many ways of making your work more efficient. And so I would definitely encourage people to get to know these plugins, download them, play with them, and just really develop a workflow that is efficient and that relies on shortcuts and that relies on hotkeys, right? So you're not always like trying to find the one menu and clicking on, basically doing 5 clicks when 2 clicks can get you the same result, right? So that's a huge thing as well, just getting to know the software and every now and then like watching someone else's workflow. I was just doing that actually, where I was watching someone like pose in Maya, and they were doing this thing where they were just rotating everything without really acknowledging or taking into account the axes. They were just like, I just want to like roughly sort of pose this character with the arms like this. And I would actually go in and select the correct axis and like rotate things only on that axis so that I wouldn't put values on the other sort of channels. But this animator was just like moving stuff around, and he was so much faster. Like for a blocking pass, of course you probably have to clean that up eventually, but for a blocking pass it was like twice as fast almost, not having to worry about every single channel and keeping things clean, so to speak. So it just gave me the idea, oh man, if I one day had to do like a very rough, very quick blocking pass, I would just start moving things around, like you should in animation. So every now and then looking at other people's workflows, you might get an idea for a workflow that you hadn't thought of, and that would actually make your work a lot faster and more efficient. And the last thing I want to say about time management is communication. So here at DreamWorks, we learned that our relationship with management, with people that tell us, okay, you need to deliver by this day, and the movie has to be, finished by this day. That doesn't change. And so how do we try to keep the artistic integrity and the quality of our shots while also honoring, of course, what the studio asks of you, and that is by communication. So again, when we are given the casting sheet, that is a list of every single shot that you're assigned with a date next to it, that's when you bring up your calendar, start putting up the post-its, and immediately I try to tell my manager, Yes, that's fine. Like the dates that you put there is totally doable. I think I can do that. Or alternatively, immediately tell them there's no way I can get this done. So it helps them, it helps you. They can rearrange the schedule if possible. They can give your shots to someone else. But that initial communication is so crucial because you prevent reaching the second week, third week, fourth week of you working on these shots and all of a sudden realizing, oh, I can't do this. That actually complicates things, not just for yourself, but also for everyone else, management as well. It stresses everyone out. You put yourself, you put stress on yourself. And it's okay, like, if you can't do a shot in the time given, it's totally okay to say, I can't do it, and give it to someone else, or share the workload, or, just ask for help, in that sense. That is a very good and professional thing to do. I think there's a bit of a misconception about, if you're given a task and you're like, oh, I can't tell them I can't do this, I gotta deliver, I gotta do all this, and you start doing all this free overtime and this and that. I understand, like, initially when you start on your career, you don't want to be the guy that says no. You want to do the things that are asked of you. But it is a good thing to practice, like knowing our limitations and also knowing that we want to, animate in reaching a certain standard, reaching a certain level of quality. And if you just animate fast and do more than you can, then of course that quality has to suffer, right? And so you want to always, kind of walk that line between, delivering on time, but also like really creating, unforgettable animation if you can.
How would you do time management as a student outside of a regular 9 to 5? Would you use the same method? Like, would you do the same thing if you
were a student?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Totally. Yeah. If I'm given an assignment and I know that the teacher expects from me blocking by Thursday next week, I would absolutely say by Monday, writing on my little calendar, I'm going to have video reference. I'm going to email the teacher, get his feedback. Okay, done. Tuesday, initial blocking. At least I'm going to have 6 poses before I go to bed, like Wednesday, this and that, and Thursday. And then again, you can just sort of plan out your week and see immediately if you're going to be able to do it or not. Because again, this calendar is empty, obviously, but say for a student, you have other responsibilities. You know that your job, takes from 8 till 6 or whatever it is, and then you go to the gym, and then you have like family activities. So immediately you'll see if, my Wednesday is booked, is full. I won't be able to do any of my classwork on that day. So you have to move that post-it to Thursday, and then but Thursday is the deadline, So again, just sort of managing those things, and if you don't have time during the week, then okay, this Saturday I'm gonna have to say no to that social event and get working on my animation, for example, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think the same principle applies, but it also works the other way around, where if you have your animation work planned out, you can also make time for the social stuff, the family time, and I think that's the ideal, right? That you're able to be so well organized with your time that you can have work-life balance.
When you would post like, okay, blocking by this day, like this by that day, because I feel like a lot of people do like the 5 or 6 poses and think, I'm done with blocking. Like, what's a good guideline for people to not jump the gun or get over eager or say, I think I'm done with blocking, and then hit spline and they're miserable.
Right.
So what would you classify as like the appropriate level of blocking?
Yeah, I think that there's not a hard and fast definition for blocking. I think blocking should always start with clarity, right? And so if I'm seeing 3 poses or 20 poses, all I'm looking for is the clarity of the intent. What is the character thinking? What is he feeling? What is the situation? Are the actions clear? That's the first thing. If the animator is able to convey that in 3 poses or 10, like, good, So I think that would be the base, sort of the foundation, the minimum requirement for blocking. In addition to that, again, if you want to be more efficient in the next stages of splining and polishing, I would add sort of more detail. So you would. Those are the minimum requirements of blocking is clarity, and then anything you can add on top of that, breakdowns, offsets, all these things that typically are done when you start splining. Even layering stuff, I find that helps a lot, and even the technique of temporarily changing everything to spline just to see how things look, and then going back to stepped again. Is pretty helpful, and it gives you that ability to add more detail without losing the timing of your animation.
Is that your workflow? What's actually let's just ask that question. What's your workflow like from the very early planning stages through polish?
I think it's I suppose there's a standard workflow, and you should always give the caveat. It depends on the shot, blah blah blah. So but if I were, it's pretty standard. Like you shoot your video reference. Lately, I've been trying to experiment a little bit with 2D animation. I'm not good at it at all. But I think it's fun to sort of forget about the rig for a little bit and just draw out things that you want to see on the rig. Even if the drawing is not that great, at least you're getting a sense of the space and the location of the character, and maybe some gestures or body poses that could be helpful. And then immediately after that, just start blocking everything out in stepped. I like to stay in stepped. It forces me to think about the poses and all the principles of appealing, staging and all this, and then move on to spline. And again, ideally, I'd love to get a detailed blocking, and then when I hit spline, it's just a bit more of a cleanup pass rather than anything else. Because I think it's pretty discouraging. I think for a lot of animators, when you like your blocking, but then you change it to spline, and it's just, I don't know. It's like you took 3 steps back somehow, but it's the same poses, but it's moving, And I want to try to avoid that, just like mentally as well. You don't want to experience like, oh, it doesn't look as good as I thought,
Yeah.
So.
Unrelated to the time management thing, I wanted to ask if you had any thoughts on like a lot of people watching are from other countries or places where there are no big studios. Do you have any thoughts or anything in that range? I have no insights or perspective on it, but
so I'm from Paraguay in South America, a country where really you can say there are no animation resources. Like there's no school, like nothing that's teaching it. And I know that's a reality for a lot of countries. I think obviously I'm North America, Europe, like amazing schools, online schools, brick and mortar schools. However, we do live in a time where obviously the internet has made all these resources available for free, for the most part. So I was just checking out an animator giving his entire workflow of how he animated a shot from beginning to end, and it's like this 30 sort of like it's 30 videos in YouTube, all of which are like an hour long. So you have like 30 hours of material there, like for free, from from a professional animator, And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is kind of amazing, right? So I think it's I don't know that you can say like we don't have any schools, or like that excuse is almost gone. You just need a internet connection and the willingness and the discipline to actually sort of go through that training, or be self-taught, basically. So there's that. There's also the online schools that are coming out, not only in America but also a lot of online schools that are now in Spanish. I know one in Hebrew, for example. Like all these little countries are coming up with their own version of online schools, which are great. I graduated from Ringling, and I do not regret at all those 4 years that I was there, in that real school, so to speak. But I can definitely see the value and the appeal in just being super focused for a year and a half or however long an online school lasts, and just do animation or just do modeling or whatever. I think it's a huge asset. So I think I'm actually excited to see like these other countries, these other parts of the world sort of starting to generate animated material, because then we see another perspective, another style, another technique that we might not have thought of, seeing it from the American market or the European market. And it's just cool to see other people being able to tell their own stories, from their own backgrounds and own points of view. If I were to speak from the perspective of Paraguay, we have a ways to go, but there's a lot of interest. I know there's a lot of talent. It's just a matter of like bringing all these resources, somehow organizing it, and also encouraging the universities, to start providing like an animation major or even a minor attached to, say, film or something like that. I think that's right now the initiative that we're trying to get going in Paraguay, and hoping to learn a lot from our neighbors that are a lot more advanced, if you will, than us. Argentina, Brazil, Chile, they're doing amazing work already, and we have a lot to learn from them. So that's another cool thing as well. Like, of course, in the United States, you'll find the best resources, and all the big movies are coming out from here. The big studios are here. However, you don't always have to look at the U.S. for inspiration or reference. There are other countries that are, if not caught up, that are pretty close in terms of quality and just resource availability. So that's exciting to me, that sort of like the democratization of animation. It's not just in one part of the world, but the talent and the resources are being shared and spread, which is cool.
Yeah. Is there anything, I know you mentioned the Facebook group, is there anything you want to like plug or anything you're doing that you want to like tell people to go there or anything like that?
Well, if you're South American or from any sort of Spanish-speaking country, we have this group called Paraguay Animation. That is sort of our initial informal grassroots effort to gather all the animators in Paraguay and neighboring countries as well, to just kind of get to know each other and just see like, what are you doing, where did you learn animation, what would you like to learn, what are your goals as an artist and as an animator. And then eventually we would like to formalize that group and maybe create an association where we can start taking steps to ask for funding or ask for help from other countries and other sources of income, start going to festivals, and have a more official representation for our country, in addition to providing training as well. We're starting to talk to the universities, even sort of being consultants in providing a curriculum for them. Like, if you want to have an animation major, maybe you should consider teaching this and this and this, like, because that would be helpful. So we're sort of tackling this on many fronts, so to speak, but right now all we have is this informal group of a bunch of friends who love animation, and we're hoping to do something with it, right? So Paraguay Animation on Facebook. Awesome. And we actually have our website, paraguayanimation.com, so people can check that out as well.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, any final thoughts on anything from time management, other animation, workflow, general tips, any final things?
I don't know. Animation, it's a fun thing. It's a bit of a silly thing if you think about it. Like, you're making cartoons, which is awesome, it's exciting, but I don't know, like, compared to the rest of the reality of the world, it is a bit of a, sort of like very, I don't want to say trivial, but it is entertainment, and that's what we're doing. We're just entertaining people. And so I would love to encourage people to take animation for what it is, something fun, something engaging, something that we can totally be passionate about, but it is a cartoon. And I mention that because, in the struggle of the animator, people put blood, sweat, and tears into their shots, and like losing sleep, and like losing family time, and all this, and very easily. And I know this. I tell this to myself. Like, animation can become your life, where it's such a time-consuming process, and it's such a competitive industry, and there's so many things that we want to do. Like, there's a short film, or personal projects, and shots, and commercial work, and all this. And sometimes it's good to absolutely enjoy it and have a great time doing it, but just take a step back and it's like, okay, what is the reality of the world? What are people going through right now? And remember that it's just a cartoon, and it should be held with a proportionate amount of our emotions should be proportionate to the kind of work that we're doing, right? I feel. And so it's cool, it's great, but it is not the most important thing in the world, I suppose.
So don't kill yourself.
Don't kill yourself. Do not, most definitely don't kill yourself over animation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.